Well, hello everyone, and welcome to the next episode of uh, Video Production 101. I'm Carl Pride from Brockton Community Access. Can you hear me? Someone
Oh,
let.
yes, we can.
Oh, great, great. Good to hear you, Ingrid. I heard that you're back in Massachusetts.
Yes, I am.
Wonderful, wonderful. I look forward to seeing you real soon.
Same
Um,
here.
and continue this journey of video production, learning all the tools and techniques we need to create amazing video.
Yes.
Um, so far, we've gone over uh, basics of some equipment, and we've talked about shot composition. We've talked about lighting. Last week was all about lighting. Uh, and we've talked about sound. Okay. We've talked about the four main elements of production. Now, tonight, what we're going to dive into, and I got several videos for us to watch again. Um, we're going to dive into script making, and we're going to dive into how to tell our stories, how to write a script. Now, for the type of production that we do, if you're doing uh, an interview show, you wouldn't be scripting out your whole show, right? If you're doing a show in the studio, if you're doing a podcast, like someone's doing, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, um, it's not a scripted uh, show necessarily. Is that true? Is
This
that
is
true?
true. Yes.
Great, great. However, what we're going to talk about is about those productions that you do want to script. You know, even if you are producing a podcast, you might want to eventually create an opening video sequence. And it's a good idea to, have a script where you break down what is it that I want to say to people to introduce my podcast. Okay.
Mhm.
So it's necessary to write a script for it. Um, we're going to dive into the different parts of a script. We're going to look at filmmaking scripts and video scripts. And then we're going to backtrack a little bit and talk. When I was looking on the web, I found a great video that's not about script writing. However, it's a great video for anyone that's in the biz of video production. So we're going to show that to today. And then I do have an assignment, which I'm going to email to you guys um, as soon as I start the video. And someone just jumped off, but I'm sure he'll be jumping back on.
He'll be back.
I'm sure of that. In that meantime, I'm going to start up the first video. And as I look for that first video, I'll let you know this is, again, a video that I found from PBS. Again, this video is a great introduction to scripts, and this is from PBS. All right, let me just find the right folder. Where did you go? Where did you go? All right. Week 5, there it is. All right. This first script is from a crash course of film production called Screenplays, and it's again produced by PBS. want to just introduce it that way first. It's about a 10-minute long piece and it is fantastic. So let's take a look.
Hi, I'm not Craig, but you're in the right place. This is still Crash Course Film. My name is Lily Gladstone, and I'm excited to spend the next 15 episodes with you exploring film production, how movies actually get made. We'll talk about all those great jobs that are listed in the credits and how movies take a huge amount of collaboration, whether you have a crew of tens or thousands. We'll go behind the scenes to see how movies are planned, shot, and edited, and take a peek at all of the equipment involved. And we'll learn how films are marketed and distributed, whether they go to movie theaters or straight to your home. But before we get anywhere near lights, camera, action, we need to start with a roadmap that gives everyone in the cast and crew the directions they need to make a film. It's time to talk about the screenplay. In most of these videos, we'll be learning about how the vast majority of narrative fiction films get made, and to do that, we need to start with the screenplay. A screenplay is a written version of a movie. Think of it as a blueprint. It's not the final product, it's a set of plans to guide the team of artists, craftspeople, and engineers as they produce a film. Every screenplay is formatted with 3 basic elements: slug lines, action, and dialogue. Each new scene begins with a new slug line. It's written in all capital letters and acts as a code to convey information to the crew. A slug line might look something like this. Here, the int stands for interior, meaning the scene takes place inside. If the scene takes place outside, the slug line would start with ext, for exterior. The second word tells us where the scene takes place, which is important information for a lot of the crew. The location scout needs to find somewhere to film the scene. The production designer alters the location to make it fit the world of the film, and the cinematographer decides how to light it. But before any of that happens, the line producer uses the location to help figure out how much the film is going to cost. The same goes for the last word in the slug line, which describes when the scene takes place, usually either day or night. Besides giving information to the crew, this can affect the cost of the movie, partially because shooting at night is more expensive. After the slug line comes the action. These are short, assertive sentences that describe who's in the scene and what they're doing. Since you watch a movie unfold over time, the action is written in present tense. So instead of writing, Iron Man flew across the sky, you'd write, Iron Man flies across the sky. The action is also limited to what the audience can see and hear. In a novel, you can describe what a character is thinking and feeling. Something like, Luke Skywalker feels miserable. In the screenplay, you'd have to write an action to show us how he feels, like Luke Skywalker hangs his head and wipes away a tear. There are a lot of guidelines and tricks to writing action lines, but the most important rule is show, don't tell. Remember that this is where the thoughts, feelings, and themes of the screenplay are turned into actions you can see. And the final piece of the screenplay is the dialogue. These are the words spoken by the characters. Feature-length screenplays are usually between 90 and 120 pages, and each page typically becomes about a minute of the final film. This is more of an average than a hard rule, by the way. Some dialogue-heavy pages will likely be shorter than a minute, while some pages with lots of action may end up longer once the film is shot and edited. Now, some stories are better suited to the screen than others. Different media have different strengths, so what makes a good poem or graphic novel won't necessarily make a good movie. A film creates an immersive visual world, that illusion of reality we keep talking about, and within that world, it can tell a story packed with complex emotions and ideas. Movies tend to focus on 3 main things: a protagonist, which is the film's main character, a goal or objective, which is something the protagonist wants, and obstacles, which is whatever's standing between the protagonist and their goal. Think about a heist movie. Maybe a master criminal wants to steal the world's biggest diamond, but finds herself facing off against a rival thief. Or a romantic comedy, where the awkward but lovable introvert wants to date their outgoing neighbor, but is afraid to leave the comfort of his own routine. Protagonist, goal, obstacle. These are the building blocks of a screen story. And it's from these that everything else emerges, like setting, character, theme, and tone. Now, the protagonist doesn't necessarily have to be the story's hero. Films are full of anti-heroes like Travis Bickle in Taxi Driver, or accidental villains like William H. Macy's character in Fargo. Usually a movie's protagonist will grow or change in some way in pursuit of their goal. The master criminal might learn humility as she attempts to steal the diamond. Or maybe the introvert overcomes his social anxiety to befriend his love interest. But the most important thing for the screenwriter is finding ways to make all of this come across visually. One way to do that is by following what's known as the hero's journey. This is a template for character development that was popularized by American mythologist Joseph Campbell. By looking at myths from cultures all over the world, Campbell identified 12 common steps taken by main characters as they transform over the course of a story. These range from resisting the call to adventure and meeting their mentor to facing their biggest fear and surviving the final ordeal, armed with everything they've learned along the way. The hero's journey was famously used by George Lucas when writing Luke Skywalker's journey from Tatooine farm kid to Jedi Knight. Some screenwriters love it, while others think it's a stale, overused formula. But if you're looking to write your first screenplay, it's not a bad place to start. Once you have some characters and plot points, you need to throw some conflict into the mix. Conflict moves a story forward and helps us identify with the protagonist as they're struggling against their obstacles. And screenplays can have different kinds of conflict. External conflict occurs whenever the protagonist encounters physical obstacles. Take the first Lord of the Rings film, The Fellowship of the Ring. Our protagonist, Frodo, has a goal: destroy the One Ring in the fires of Mount Doom. No problem, right? Except, in order to get to Mount Doom, he has to travel across the known world, avoid an endless army of orcs and monsters, and outwit the powerful fiery eye that's always searching for him. Not to mention, he's the shortest guy in the movie, and they make him walk barefoot the whole way. Don't even give the poor guy's shoes. On the other hand, internal conflict is when the protagonist wrestles with some emotional or psychological obstacle. For Frodo, that could be his ignorance of the wider world, a lack of faith in himself, or even his jealousy and selfishness. Usually the more conflict the protagonist faces, the more they transform to overcome it. But that doesn't mean the fate of the world has to be at stake in every single screenplay. The writer should scale the conflict to fit the kind of story they're telling. Like in Bridesmaids, Kristen Wiig's character just wants to be a good maid of honor to her best friend. She faces a lot of external conflict, from a rival bridesmaid to some severely undercooked Brazilian food. And internally, she feels conflicted about her best friend getting married, the loss of her bakery, and her self-worth. The universe isn't going to implode if she doesn't succeed, but we still empathize with her as she struggles to achieve her goal. Now, once you have some ideas for the story you want to tell, how are you supposed to organize them all? Screenwriters often use something called three-act structure, which is based on theories by ancient Greek philosopher Aristotle from more than 2,000 years ago. The idea is simple, that every story has a beginning, middle, and end, and that certain kinds of events happen in each section. Act 1 sets up the world of the screenplay, introducing us to the characters and identifying the protagonist and their goal. In The Wizard of Oz, most of Act 1 takes place in Kansas. It's the black and white part. We get external conflicts between Dorothy and that mean old lady down the street, as well as Auntie Em. We also learn that Dorothy is unsatisfied with her life and dreams of something more exciting somewhere over the rainbow. Once she's transported to Oz, she meets her antagonist, the Wicked Witch of the West, and we learn that her goal is to find the wizard so she can go home. In Act 2, the protagonist faces increasingly difficult conflicts as they pursue their goal. They meet allies, encounter successes and setbacks, and are often brought to a point of hopelessness. For Dorothy, this is when the wizard refuses to take her home unless she can defeat the Wicked Witch. To get what she wants, she'll have to face her fears and do the seemingly impossible. Finally, Act 3 contains the climax of the film. There's usually some epic face-off between the protagonist and antagonist, the person who most directly opposes them. That confrontation usually decides whether or not the protagonist achieves their goal. And in most Hollywood screenplays, they do. Dorothy gets back to Kansas, Luke Skywalker blows up the Death Star, Simba defeats Scar and restores the Circle of Life to the Pride Lands. But the guidelines of the three-act structure are just that, guidelines. Foreign and independent movies can have more ambiguous endings, from the open-ended final shots of The Wrestler or Birdman to the heartbreak of Brokeback Mountain or the death of Mr. Lazarescu. Films like MASH, Traffic, or Magnolia split their stories up among different protagonists, while movies like Pulp Fiction and Memento scramble time, telling their stories out of order. And films like Mulholland Drive, Rashomon, or Man with a Movie Camera seem to reject the three-act structure altogether. Remember, screenplays are one part of a longer process. They're a blueprint. Whether they follow more traditional rules or invent their own, the clear, concise visual language of a screenplay provides the foundation for all the work that is to come. Today we learned about the format of screenplays and why they look the way they do. We talked about the essential building blocks of a film story, and we broke down the traditional three-act structure, what happens when and why. Next time, we'll talk about pitching and pre-production as the cameras get ready to roll. Crash Course Film Production is produced in association with PBS Digital Studios. You can head over to their channel to check out a playlist of their latest shows, like Comanity, It's Okay to Be Smart, and Physics Girl. This episode of Crash Course was filmed in the Dr. Cheryl C. Kinney Crash Course studio with the help of all these nice people. And our amazing graphics team is Thought Cafe.
All right. That was a great episode. Understanding the basics of script writing. I'm sure that you have heard of the hero's journey before. Yeah, you've heard of the hero's journey before? Ingrid, have you? No. Okay. Well, you know what? I'm going to give you a little more detail about that with this video. Let's see. Here we go.
Hey guys, what's up? We're going to be talking about story in this lesson. I brought my friends Buzz and Woody to help explain what story is. A great writer put together what I think is one of the best resources for writers, screenwriters. It's called The Writer's Journey by Christopher Wagner. And he wrote this idea for writers that is 12 steps, and it goes through each phase of a hero. So if you need a great resource, this is an incredible one. And he goes in way more detail than I'm going to go in this lesson. But we're going to go through the hero's journey and look at it through the eyes of Woody and Buzz in their movie, The Toy Story, which you've probably all seen. It's a great example for this because even though it doesn't cover every step exactly like the writer's journey outlines, it's very close. And really what you're going to see is the hero's journey is what makes a great story. Not something you have to stick to in your writing, but a great outline and starting point for writers. So the ordinary world is in Andy's room where the toys live. They come alive when he's gone. This is out of the ordinary from a mundane world, and this is the part where we're introduced to Woody. After that step comes the call to adventure. You know, Woody is replaced by Buzz at Andy's birthday party, and he's really upset by that. He tells all the toys, and he gets really jealous. The call to adventure is when the hero is really faced with a problem, and this is Woody's big problem, that there's a new toy in town, and he's taken away the attention from Woody. The refusal of the call is the third step, and that's when Woody denies that Buzz is the new guy in town, and his jealousy, he just denies it and says, well, I'm still Andy's favorite toy. Look, it's on the bottom of my boot. The author talks about how the refusal of the call is about fear. This is where he's reluctant. He's facing the greatest fear of the unknown. The fourth step is meeting with the mentor, and this is not so much seen in Toy Story, though some would say that, you know, Woody actually mentors Buzz and shows him around the world of toys. But if you look at Star Wars, this is when Obi-Wan Kenobi takes Luke under his wing and guides him to become a Jedi. So that's meeting the mentor. The fifth chapter is one of the most important, and it's crossing the threshold. And the threshold is what is really keeping back Woody and Buzz, or the main hero, from going on their adventure. And in this case, Buzz and Woody begin their adventure going out the window, and that's their own threshold. And so now they're both in this new scary world beyond what we're introduced in the first chapter, their ordinary world. The next chapter is Test, Allies, and Enemies. We're gonna really see how these guys do out in the real world. They're gonna have to fight some battles. In this case, you know, Buzz and Woody end up in this arcade after going on a pizza truck, and they've got to find out their new friends, and they actually meet like the Claw and these little alien figures, and so they're meeting new people in their adventure. In this sixth chapter, they're also really figuring out what this other world is about and what kind of lies ahead. The Road of Trials is where the characters are going to face even more battles. They're going to continue trying to get to their goal, which for these guys, it's getting back home to Andy. These are natural challenges that the hero is facing along the journey. The next part is the central ordeal, and this is where Sid, the bad kid on the neighborhood, is torturing toys, and they encounter him for the first time. And this is the point where they realize they need to really get out of this situation, and this is almost their main battle. After they fight their main battle and get out of Sid's yard, their reward is they've got freedom from that area, but they still have a long way to go, and that leads to the next point, which is the road back home. And it's great because in Toy Story, they literally are on a road going back home. They see the moving truck, they're trying to chase up to that, and they have to help each other in order to get there. I believe the resurrection of this story is when Woody and Buzz realize their new friendship, and Woody really realizes Buzz is not just a toy, that he can do something cool. And when he flies, I think that moment when they're in the air and he's like, "You're flying," that's when Woody acknowledges he's the real deal. And then it finishes up on the last point. If we're going in a clock, we just went clockwise to the very top, almost back to where we started. But this new friendship is the elixir, and you really see that in the final scene of Toy Story when they're Christmas and opening up new toys. So that is the hero's journey with Toy Story. They're a great example of those 12 steps. And again, read the writer's journey to learn more about that. And what I would do with this information is test yourself, test your own stories. If you wrote something, compare it to this. It doesn't have to match perfectly, but it's a good way to say, how is my story comparing to all the classics that have been run through this funnel, the audio, the editing, everything needs to complement the story. So if you can remember one thing from this course, story is king.
All right. That is a great explanation of the hero's journey. And the book that he mentioned, if you want to email me and I'll send you the name of that book. It's a great book. I emailed you during the video, I emailed you a script. It's a first run of a script that I'm working on for what community television is and the history of community television. I'm going to dive into what the homework is for this week. Okay. It's an opportunity to look at something written and start coming up with, well, what's the story that we're going to be telling here? What do we want to see and hear? And start writing with that script. You know, what do you see? So put the script on one part of your page, and on the other side, start drawing out, well, what do you think we need to visually see for each of these paragraphs or parts of the presentation that I make there? I do a historical look at what community television is, all the way back to, you know, the days when people used to bring a soapbox into the center of town to talk about it, to talk to their community. Visually, in my mind, I have ideas that I can see. However, I want your input. I want to hear from you. What shots do you think we need to start producing with this?
So quick question.
Yeah.
So we're going to, so the email that you sent us, we're going to, it's basically like a script and we just got to add towards it.
Yeah, add towards it, like start breaking it out into, if this is one idea, how do you visually see it laying out as a video? You know, what, and let's go big as far as what production value would we put to this? You know, there's, like I mentioned, there's a part in there that first talks about the soapbox. So already, like I said, visually, I see someone pushing out a soapbox into maybe the center of the town. However, it's up to us to write it out, and then we're going to shoot this stuff together. Okay. The idea is this week, I introduce it to you. For next week, you email me back the ideas that you have, and we'll start talking about it next week. And then the following week, we'll actually get together and actually shoot some scenes and start working with all the skills that you guys have been building on already. That makes sense?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Excellent. Excellent. So that being said, that's the homework for this week.
Carl, how much can we add? Or like
How much do you want to add?
Okay. All right.
Yeah. I mean, it's not a blank slate, but it's an open slate. You know, I believe that we have I got a framework there for us to create anything we want. And I want to tell a great story. So I'm counting on you to tell the great story. I mean, that's what we are. We're storytellers. That's what video is. So we're going to play with it and see where it takes us. I'm really excited about this part of the program. It's opportunity to really create something unique. And there is no on this. There's no, well, I don't like that. I'm like, no, if you guys want to go there, let's go there. Let's do it. Yeah.
Okay.
So what I want to end with, the video that I do want to end with for this week, has nothing to do with script writing at all. It actually has to do with shots. Actually, it does have to do with script writing. It has a little bit to do with everything. It's again about another 10-minute video from PBS, and it's taking a look at one of the greatest, what's known as one of the greatest films of all times, Citizen Kane. Have you seen Citizen Kane?
Okay.
What?
No.
No. Okay.
No, I
Well,
haven't.
it's
have
a
not.
okay. Well, it's a black and white film, and it's known as one of the greatest films of all time. Now, of course, in this video, it also says, of course, that's always subjective and all that. However, watch the excerpts that he's talking about, and you're going to see some amazing stuff for, for what, 80 years ago, 1941 is when they did this film. And Orson Welles produced it. It's a great video, a great reminder that it's not always about having the super graphics and stuff like that. It can be a lot simpler, and there's tricks of the trade that are in this that are important to learn, important to see. So that's why I want to share this with you. So here we go. Let's grab this and enjoy this.
Thanks to CuriosityStream for supporting Crash Course. Hello! As you might have noticed, I'm not Craig or Lily. My name's Michael Aranda, and I'll be your host for the last third of Crash Course Film. Now, since we're getting to know each other, let me ask you a question. What's your favorite film? Maybe there's a movie that makes you want to get fit, or become a spy, or save the world, or maybe you love anything that Zoe Saldana is in because she's just the coolest. Films can have an awesome story, or sloppy lighting, dazzling special effects, or characters who are just straight up stereotypes. All these things can affect how you feel about a movie, or whether you'd give it a thumbs up on Netflix, because that's a thing now, but they can also affect how it fits into cinema history and impacts the world around us. We'll think critically about a lot of different movies, starting with an American classic that many people call the greatest film ever made. It came from ambition and some unusual circumstances with Orson Welles at the helm, and even though it's been a long time since its release in 1941, the film's technical cleverness and story still resonate with audiences today. I am talking, of course, about Citizen Kane. Calling Calling Citizen Kane one of the best films of all time is a complicated claim to make. To be honest, the idea of ranking movies and making a top 10 list may be fun, but it's not what film criticism is really about. It's about thinking deeply about how the movie works, both to us as an audience member and within history and society. It's about understanding, deconstructing, feeling, and learning. So, is Citizen Kane the greatest movie ever made? Well, we can't answer that because that's not the question we should be asking. But there's clearly something about it that sticks with us. And maybe that something is its origin story. Orson Welles was hoisted into the spotlight at the ripe young age of 23 when he was performing with the Mercury Theater Company, a troupe that he helped create. In 1938, Welles directed and narrated the radio drama The War of the Worlds, and supposedly struck fear into some listeners who thought that an actual alien invasion was happening.
We know now that in the early years of the 20th century, this world was being watched closely by intelligences greater than man.
But he also caught the attention of studio execs at RKO, one of the 5 film studios that reigned during the golden age of Hollywood. Not only that, but they gave him complete creative control, which was like really unusual at the time. So he did what any plucky artist in his mid-20s would do. He packed up his stuff and invited his buddies from the Mercury Theater Company to come with him to Hollywood. Now, I don't want to sell them short. This was a group of very good actors, and despite his lack of experience with the movie industry, Welles leapt into this project with a lot of ambition, performing experience, and fresh ideas. He wanted to be involved in as many aspects of the film as possible, from directing to starring as the film's eponymous Charles Foster Kane. Welles filled out his production team with other talented men from Hollywood who were itching to experiment with their craft. People like Greg Toland, a cameraman who contributed a lot to the film's look and technical innovations. And Welles is credited as co-writer with Herman J. Mankiewicz, a journalist who hopped over into the world of filmmaking and was an experienced screenwriter by the time he worked on this project. Citizen Kane tells the life story of a wealthy newspaper magnate. The first time we meet Kane, he's on his deathbed in a massive mansion called Xanadu, dramatically murmuring his last word. The story is told in flashbacks through interviews with people Kane once knew, like his friend and fellow reporter Jedediah Leland, his business manager Mr. Bernstein, and his second wife Susan Alexander Kane. In the last sequence of shots, we find out that Rosebud is referencing a sled he had as a kid before he was separated from his family and sent to boarding school with a new guardian. So, Citizen Kane could be a story about, well, a lot of things. A loss of childhood, human flaws, memory, or the complications of power and wealth. Film criticism is pretty subjective. But Citizen Kane is also a story that was influenced by real life, specifically tycoons like the news mogul William Randolph Hearst. While Welles insisted the film wasn't meant to be a personal attack on Hearst, all of the parallels and the fact that Mankiewicz was a former friend of Hearst made him take the film real personally. And when you have a buttload of money and power over lots of news outlets, your grudges become public. Fast. Initially, RKO and Orson Welles planned on debuting Citizen Kane at the Radio City Music Hall, like other big RKO movies, but the venue turned it down. Eventually, the film's release was delayed until May 1st, 1941 in New York, and the critical reception was actually pretty good. A review by Kate Cameron, published on May 2nd in the New York Daily News, called Citizen Kane one of the most interesting and technically superior films that has ever come out of a Hollywood studio. The controversy did mess with the film's commercial success, though. It didn't gain much public traction until it was released again in the 1950s. So part of what makes Citizen Kane memorable is that it was an ambitious project headed by a maverick filmmaker and had a lot of drama around its release. We humans do love ourselves some drama. But the content of the film speaks for itself too. The creators of Citizen Kane had the freedom to play and innovate. Many of their technical experiments changed the way film was being used as a storytelling medium, which arguably could be another way to define greatness. It takes a keen eye to notice some of these tricks, or at the very least some good commentary tracks. A lot of the innovation had to do with cameras. Greg Toland, the cinematographer, helped pioneer the use of deep focus lenses so that everything in a scene is in focus at once, not just the foreground or the background. Citizen Kane doesn't use focus to guide your attention in a scene. Instead, things like dialogue or movement draw your eye to certain people at certain times. It's very much like theater, where Welles had honed his directing and acting chops. They use perspective to surprise you, like to mess with your sense of scale when Kane walks toward a normal-looking background only to be dwarfed by a huge window or fireplace. It's a neat visual effect, but it also punctuates the story with a little metaphor. You're seeing this man physically shrink into his environment as he's losing control over his business and life. And camera movement movements are combined with other practical effects to really immerse you in the story. Take the scene where Kane is a kid playing in the snow where his parents are inside a cabin and talking about sending him away. The camera pulls back through a window and eventually stops on the other side of a dining table, but from the final framing you can see that the table would have been in the way of the movement. The trick is in the set. It's actually a mechanical table that splits and comes back together, so the mise-en-scène is never broken and the scene can keep playing out. You, the viewer, are none the wiser because you're wrapped up in the incredible illusion of the reality the film is constructed. Other practical tricks are used in the Inquirer office, where Kane's newspaper staff works. These scenes were unusual for movies at the time because there are visible ceilings. Now, this doesn't sound that weird because, normal office buildings have ceilings, but production teams usually stuck lights and sound equipment above their actors' heads. So to keep the movie magic intact, they had to keep ceilings out of frame. In this case, the lights and microphones are still up there, just hidden right above the ceilings, which are made of muslin sheets. They also cut out chunks of the floor to make room for the camera so they could get dramatic low-angle shots, making the actors look larger than life. The trick to Citizen Kane is that all these effects, which are everywhere, don't feel like effects in the same way a CGI dragon does. They subtly draw you into the world. For instance, Wells often blends matte drawings with physical sets to make everything seem more immersive despite a limited budget. This is how they create the beginning of the film, leading us toward the window of Xanadu and Kane's deathbed. Plus, it's how they make the inside of Xanadu, the outside of the Inquirer building, and the audiences during the big campaign speech and opera. These tricks were accomplished with optical printers, which let them shoot and light two images or scenes separately and stitch them into one. Effects also let them add visual twists to the story in ways Wells couldn't with live theater. Like when Susan Alexander is performing in the opera, we crane up from the stage and fade into the rafters to see the opera's production team reacting to how awful her performance is. The transition is precise and deliberate, and nowhere near as easy as dropping a fade into a digital video editor today. Now maybe you noticed some of these technical tricks, but they're done well and not obvious unless you're paying close attention. And that's one of the coolest things about good filmmaking. But a lot of the time, what makes our favorite movies so memorable is just a well-told story. And if you think about it, Citizen Kane doesn't really have a mind-blowing plot. It's a straightforward tale about a powerful, wealthy newspaper tycoon and his shortcomings, and the dialogue is all pretty crisp and generic. You get a newsreel summary of Kane's life at the beginning, but it's mostly told through flashbacks, and they're part of what makes the film feel so true to life. And even though it's easy to link Charles Foster Kane with William Randolph Hearst, this archetype of a driven, powerful jerk who just wants people to love him is pretty relatable to a lot of us, even Wells himself. So you might see things you like and hate about yourself in Kane, or Susan Alexander's naive optimism, or Jedediah Leland and his disillusionment with a friend. Honestly, the fact that it's his childhood sled isn't the most profound or surprising twist out there. It's not like there are hidden identities or I see dead people. But you have to admit the film goes all in on the idea of lost childhood. Kane drowns his feelings in material objects and tries to live vicariously through Susan Alexander's youth, telling her, "We're going to be a great opera star." Or maybe you agree with the film critic Pauline Kael that the sled is just kinda gimmicky. But critics, including her, don't call Citizen Kane great because it makes you realize profound things about life, the universe, and everything. Every scene isn't a masterpiece, but the film holds up over time and people seem to get a lot out of it, historically, technically, or narratively. And like I mentioned before, the whole idea of the best film of all time is ultimately kind of silly. It's more about understanding why and how we make movies that mean so much to us or to the world. And that is pretty beautiful in itself. Next time, we'll take a hard left turn into an action-adventure horror film that's almost as quotable as Casablanca, James Cameron's Aliens. And if you want to watch along with us, there's a full list of movies in the description.
All right. So, a lot of interesting stuff about filmmaking in there. The crane shot that he was talking about as it goes up through the stage, I've done similar ideas through the years, and that's where you learn to do them, learn to make things powerful is by watching some of the great films. So that's it. What's your questions for today? Any questions?
Yeah, is Citizen Kane, is that on Netflix right now?
It's on YouTube.
It's on YouTube.
You can find it on
I just
YouTube.
pulled it up.
Yeah, it's not on Netflix at the moment. I believe it might be on HBO, but it's I know you can find it on YouTube. So my suggestion is make it a movie night, grab some popcorn and watch Citizen Kane. So great filmmaking. All right. That does it. Make yourself some great notes and let's start working towards our project. This concludes week 5. Next week is week 6. So we're starting to make the turn into doing our productions and doing them well. It's not only about just getting out there and doing them, but we're also looking to make some great film or videos. So
Looking forward
great
to it.
job, guys. Keep on going.
Absolutely.
Okay,
All right
right.
now.
All right. Thank you, guys. Have a
No
good day.
problem. Have a good one.
bye.